Laura Patterson is our guest today on the Commission Code. Laura is going to tell us all about herself because I tell you what, she's got some great ideas about running a business and being successful in that business and what it takes to grow your business. Without me trying to murder it, Laura, tell us a little bit about yourself. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Morris, for having me. And I hope everybody listening will take away a couple of good ideas. So I am an entrepreneur. I founded VisionEdge Marketing and Growth Strategy firm in 1999. And we help companies, B2B predominantly, retain the customers that matter and attract the ones that fit. And so over the last couple of decades, we've worked with mostly B2B owners or executives or board of directors who have, complex products that need to grow their companies and replace sort of the random acts or scattered activities they often employ to grow with more deliberate, data-driven kinds of decisions that will reduce the risk, which is really important for all of us in the business, especially in uncertain times, and improve performance. So that's what we do. And that's what I do.
Oh, it sounds great. Well, all our folks out there listening to us are probably business owners. That's generally who we talk to, or professional salespeople. Where do you begin to help somebody grow their business, Laura? What do you do?
Well, first question we always start with is where are you today and where do you want to be, and how have you grown so far and what's working, what's not working, and what is what does the competitive environment look like? What do your customers tell you is the reason they buy from you? All those kinds of questions that we go through in the conversation to help figure out what might make the most sense. And it's really important, we try to understand what do they know about their customers, what do they know about their competitors, and what do they know about their market so that they are, bringing something relevant and that resonates with the people who want to buy from them. Because if you don't have something that you're not solving a problem, they understand how you're relevant to solving the problem and why they should buy it from you instead of somebody else, you're just going to be kind of pushing a rock up a hill.
So you better be real clear about where you're beginning, where your starting point is, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think you have to know where you are to know. It's kind of hard to figure out where to get to your destination if you don't know exactly where you are at the moment.
It really is, isn't it? I mean, it just, yeah. We could do analogies on that for the next hour. The fact is, so many people don't even know where they are right now. They've never done the work to figure that out and to analyze and know who their real competitors are, who their customers are, just whoever calls me or walks in the door. So I think that's a great point. You gotta take some time to figure out where you are so you can set up a great plan for how you're going to go from here going forward, right?
Yes, and Morris, when you're really in the very beginning of your company, and perhaps some of the people listening are just starting out, it's easy to get opportunistic because you need to have cash and money in order to continue to run. But over time, you have to become less opportunistic and more strategic to get where you want to go. And there's different ways to grow your company. And for a moment, let's just talk about some of those different ways. And, I'll talk about why I think one way is better than another in a moment. But there are companies that are really product centric, and those companies because they have a lot of money in their R&D line on their budget, and they're all about innovation, and they're coming up with ideas and products even before there's really a market for them. We call those product centric companies, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with being that kind of a company. That can, we see that happen in technology a lot. The challenge you often have, though, is that you may be one of the first to market, but that doesn't necessarily mean you'll be the one who owns that market. Another kind of company is what we would call a sales-centric company. And you really know those kinds of companies because the salespeople pretty much run the show and it's all about making a number. And they get a number at the beginning of the month or a quarter or whatever the timeline is. And I've been in that job, and I bet some of the people listening are in that job. And you're a hero if you make your number, and you're not a hero if you don't make that number. And if you don't make that number after a certain period of time, you find yourself out the door. And that's kind of a sales-centric company. I mean, there are pros and cons to all of these, but the challenge with being a sales-centric company is that as a salesperson in my life, if I'll sell what I need to sell to make my number. And it might even be things my company doesn't want to sell right now or doesn't have to sell, or I'm going to make promises that the company can't meet or at a price that the company can't really sell it at and make money. So there are all kinds of challenges when you're sales centric. Another way of running your company is market centric. These are companies who do a lot of research, like the product centric companies, and are aware of what the trends are, but they are riding a wave. So anyone listening right now has probably seen all the companies that have popped up around the AI space. 3 years ago, there were hardly any companies in the AI space. Today, you probably couldn't count the number of companies in the AI space. They're all riding the wave of the AI market. And so they're market centric. Some of those companies will make it, and a lot of them won't, or they'll merge or get acquired. And that happens often, particularly in new areas of growth. And the last one is a customer-centric company. And this is the kind of company I like to recommend and encourage all companies become, because this is really about making decisions with your customers in mind so that you are smart about what you're going to do, and you're going to create both customer and business value. Because if you're not creating customer value in the end, you probably will not be around very long. So, those of you out there that are avid readers are probably very familiar with Peter Drucker and know that he said, when it comes to the most important things in a company, it's innovation and marketing. And if you haven't ever read a book by Phil Kotler, who I consider sort of the modern father of marketing, upstream marketing, he says the purpose of business is to find, keep, and grow the value of customers. So that is kind of our philosophy at VisionEdge Marketing.
What was it Drucker said? Strategy eats everything else for breakfast or something along those lines?
Yes, something like that.
Ought to, ought to know my quotes before I use them, shouldn't I? But
Oh,
it's
strategy is
amazing.
important, and a lot of people, they don't know what strategy is.
But you know
Stra-
what you do, excuse me, Laura, but I want to kind of relate that back. What you're saying about being customer centric is that is a strategy, right? I mean, that is what we're trying to do. If that's my overall objective, if that's the way I'm going to run my company, that's kind of a mission or a vision or a strategy, if you wanted to, that I
it's
want to
certainly,
utilize, right?
I would call it an operating model, not
Okay.
necessarily a strategy, an operating model. And you
Yeah.
would have strategies to achieve that. So let's get some clarity around strategy, because I think a lot of people are often confused by strategy. People will come to me or I'll go to them and we'll have a conversation, and I'll often ask, well, what is your strategy for growth? And I'll hear different things. Our strategy is PR. Our strategy is social media, whatever. Those are not strategies. I'm sorry if you're listening and you want to take that up with me, feel free to reach out and we can have a conversation about that. But those are tactics that you'll deploy, and you could deploy all of various tactics to any strategy depending on what makes the most sense. So let's give a little moment for strategy, and then I'll come back and
Super. Yeah. Yeah.
all right. So Henry Cloud wrote a great book. It is called Necessary Endings, and I'll just share books that I have found valuable here along the way. And he has a great metaphor, and I'm going to use his metaphor. He talks about strategy being about making choices. And I think that's something that a lot of people often don't realize they need to do. And so we have it, many business owners tend to have random acts of revenue, random acts of marketing, random acts of selling, random acts of variety of things. And when you are strategic in nature, you are beginning to replace those random acts with deliberate choices. His metaphor is about a rose bush. And Morris, are you a gardener?
Yeah, I tried to grow grass one year, but it didn't work.
Well,
And
I'm
by
a
grass, I
gardener.
mean the green stuff out in my front yard, not the other kind of grass that,
Okay,
do
well,
other things with. Yeah.
for
Okay.
those of you listening that are gardeners, just for a moment, imagine that you have a spot in your yard, not Morris's yard, your yard. And in your yard, you have an idea for what you want to do for landscaping. And in that particular bed, you have in your mind this beautiful rose bush that's going to be the centerpiece. piece of that. And it's going to be the pride of the neighborhood. It is going to be glorious when it is fully mature. And what Dr. Cloud talks about is if you're a gardener and have familiarity with gardening and you know something about roses, they take care. They get things that you have to tend to, and you want to prune off dead things, and you even might have to prune off things that are growing and are going well, but they're not going to get you the vision of the rose bush. Or sometimes you might even have to prune off really good and beautiful blooms in order to feed the other blooms. So that is his way of talking about strategy. And that really is important because sometimes in your business, you have to kill off and prune dead stuff. You have to sometimes kill off things that are still okay, but will not support your business, or even good things. So that's where strategy plays a really key role. And what we say is, if it's not creating customer value, prune it. If it's creating customer value, but not much business value, prune it. If it's creating some customer value, but it's taking away from places you can create more customer value, prune it. So that is the idea behind customer centricity, is that you're thinking in those kinds of terms around how you're creating business value through customer value, and how customer value helps you reduce risk. Because if you're creating customer value, when times are challenging, you will still be able to be there because you've created enough customer value that people will continue to buy from you.
It creates loyalty.
It creates loyalty, it creates referrals, it creates all kinds of great things for you.
Which
Share
is,
wallet,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And that's exactly what you're trying to do, I think, is build that long-term business relationship, right?
Yes. Yes. So when people come to me and they say, well, what are some ways that we could do that? It really comes down to again, to what you asked me earlier, Morris, is, well, where do you want to go? Because different ways can get you there. So I'll make some comments about where people might want to go. And then I want to get back to some of the things it takes to be good at customer centricity.
Good.
So let's say you have done a really good job of building a share and relationships in a particular niche or vertical that you serve. And one of the things you might decide that you want to do is leverage that to go to an adjacent market. So that would be an adjacent market kind of strategy. Or let's say that you've got an entry into a space and you want to grow the amount of share you have there. And you take a look at the number of companies that are in that space, and there are lots of them. And so you might say, I want a tipping point strategy. I'm going to go after maybe these set of customers who are a really good fit for our product and services. So product market fit and value fit. And I'm going to get as many of them as I can get so that I can tip the market in my favor as a brand of choice. Or let's say you're in a market and in order to get more market share, those people in that market tend to follow a few key leaders. So you might go after larger, what we would call leadership companies, where people follow and say, look, for us to get the kind of traction in that market, we're going to have business with these 5, 7, whatever companies, because what those companies do, others then follow. So it's really understanding a lot about your market and your customers and how they buy will help to affect the kinds of strategies that you put in place. And those are just examples. There's so many kinds of different strategies, but those are a couple examples.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That really does. So we start by figuring out where we are and where we want to go, and then choose a strategy to get us there.
Yes, but you're going to have some things along the way if you want to be customer centric. So one thing, obviously, to make good decisions is you need good data. So you need to have data about your customers, about your market, about your competition. What is it you need to know? What is it you think you know that you need to have clarity around? And one of the best ways to think about our customers are not fish, but let's use fishing as sort of a way to explain the process a little bit. I've told this story before, and I'll share it with your audience. My grandfather had five grandchildren, and when we were little, it was a big deal to be able to spend the weekend with my grandparents. There were 11 people in the family, and so we would get together pretty regularly. And those of us who got to spend the weekend in the summer knew that we would be doing one of my grandfather's favorite hobbies, which was going fishing. And everybody would come together on Sunday for dinner. So obviously our goal was to get enough fish to feed 11 people for dinner. So I always ask this question. I'm going to ask you, Morris. What do you think is the first question my grandfather would ask a grandchild that's 4 years old about going fishing? What do you think is the very first question?
Oh, I have no idea. Maybe where? Where do we go?
First question is, what kind of fish are we fishing for?
Oh, okay, cool.
Right? Because that determines everything. Now, I thought I was pretty smart at 4 years old, and I remember saying something like this to my grandfather: blue ones. And and my grandfather, being much smarter than me, said, "Oh, so we're going to go after blue perch, and that is going to determine everything." Because now he says to me, "Go tell grandma that we're going to need bait for blue perch." And blue perch is in the local lake, right? So he's picked a local lake, so we know where the fish is, and we know that we're going to go early in the morning because we have to feed all these people that are going to be arriving for Sunday dinner. So we get up, we head out to the lake, and we get out of the car, and we're getting all of our stuff. And remember, you're 4 years old, and Papa asks you your second question. What do you think is the second question?
I blew the first one, so I'm not even going to try the second one.
Where,
You tell
where
me.
should where should we put our pole?
There you go.
Now, this has a lot to do with the fish. For example, is the fish like it on the shore, like in the reeds, or does it like it out in the deep water? Does it like it in the shade? Does it like it in the sun? So he's having this conversation about the fish, right? Hopefully, as people are listening, you are beginning to think she's not really talking about fish. She's talking about customers.
Yeah.
What is their preferences? Where do they like to buy? How do they like to buy? When do they like to buy? Right? And we're looking around at the competition. Do we want to be near where everybody else has got a pole, or do we want to be somewhere else? These are all the kinds of things you would ask about your customers. And if you don't know the answers to these basic questions, then all the bait you brought with you and you put on the hook and you send out there will be for naught. And that's what happens when people do marketing and selling that's random. They just put the bait on the hook. It could be an email, it could be a social media ad, it could be a direct mail piece, it could be a video, it could be any number of things that they're doing, an event that they're sponsoring. And those are becoming random acts because they haven't really thought about the strategy in order to get the fish to bite. Because that's the goal, right? Now, not all fish are keepers, and that's a whole nother conversation about customer retention. But maybe that fishing story will serve some of your listeners well.
Oh, I think so. It really does. It makes perfect sense. Where's the right fishing hole? And then what are you going to do when you get there?
Yeah.
And the same thing's true here. Let's go where the customers are, our customers are. We're going to know who that is to begin with and what they will respond to. So no, I think it's a perfect analogy. It makes great sense. So where do you go from there, Laura?
Okay, so now we've been talking about being customer centric, and we've talked about two of what we call the four game changers: strategy and data. And we talked about the game changer of being customer centric, but you have to put processes in place, and a lot of companies struggle with processes and getting them in place. And there was a book written in 1999, and the author for it is escaping me at the moment, but it's called the E-Myth, and it doesn't stand for, you're familiar with it, Morris?
Yeah, Michael Gerber.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes. And E stands for entrepreneurial, right? The entrepreneur's myth. And one of the things he talks about in the book is that if you don't want to be a slave to your business, and I know one of the things you want, Morris, for your customers is for them to enjoy the fruits of their labor, and right, to be able to make money and enjoy the fruits of their labor and not be a slave to their business, then one of the things that's critical for doing that is processes. And many companies are not good at process mapping, understanding what the processes are, And we like to talk about revenue generating processes, customer facing processes, as opposed to operational processes, which is how you run the inside of your business. So you need to have all of those kinds of processes, how you run your business so that you can make decisions. And the more you run your business to be customer centric, the better. So would you like to hear a quick story of a company that did that well? And I may be able to share a story of a company that didn't. Which,
Sure.
okay. So in Texas, which is where I am, we have a regional grocery store chain called HEB. And we had I love my HEB, and that used to be one of their campaign slogans. I truly do love my HEB. And some people that are listening might know that a few years ago, Austin was slammed with a terrible ice storm. And and my husband always says, if it weren't for the last minute when it comes to me, and we decided kind of at the last minute that we would go to the grocery store and make sure we had everything in preparation for this storm. They were telling everybody, make sure you have everything, batteries, water, batteries for your flashlights, water, candles, things like that, things you can eat that don't require your oven or stove to work, all the usual stuff. So apparently I wasn't the only one that thought about the last minute, because when we went to the HEB, there were lots of us in the store, and we're going up and down the aisles and putting things in our basket, thinking about, will that need to be refrigerated? Do we need a can opener for that? All the usual things that people think about. Can we to eat? And also keeping in mind that our dog, make sure we have food that and things for him as well. And while we're in the store, the lights go out and everything ceases. And why is it, Morris, that when you're in a place when the lights go out, everybody starts to whisper? I don't know why that is, but have you ever noticed that people start to whisper? So I turn to Mark and I say, "What just happened?" And he says, "I think the lights went out."
Good for him. Good answer.
And then you hear this voice from the front of the store, and it's a man's voice. He says hello and says who he is. He says, "I'm the manager of the store. And as you can see, we have lost power. And in a moment, we will get a small amount of power back on through our generators, but we're not going to have enough power to check you out. All of the cash machines are down because that's not going to work. And the main lights are not coming back on and all those other things. So what I would like you to do is stop where you are and come to the front of the store with your carts." So we come to the front of the store, and there he and the employees are manually opening the automatic doors. And he turns to all of us and he says, "Please take what you have in your carts to your cars. And we hope that you will all be safe during the storm. And we look forward to seeing you in better weather." And out the door we go. So thousands of dollars are going out the door. Nobody's paying for anything, right? But imagine the goodwill. And of course, I've told this story many times.
Oh, yeah.
But this is an example of a customer-centric company. They made a customer who empowered an employee to make a decision and they had a process in place to do so. So think about it. Would your employees make the right decision for customers? Do you have the processes in place to facilitate that? Those are some kinds of questions you should be asking. If you don't have the processes in place to facilitate it, they're not going to know what to do. So be sure you think through all of your processes and that you have them documented. So that's the third game changer, is around process. So we've talked about process, and we've talked about strategy, and we've talked about data, and the last thing being what you measure. So different people measure different things, but in the end, if you're going to be customer centric, then you need to somehow be measuring things related to customers. So things like share of wallet or customer lifetime value, things like, how hard or easy, like customer effort, how hard or easy is it for them to do business with you? Customer engagement. There's lots of different ways and things that people can measure that are customer related. We have a tendency in business to focus on like a revenue number or a profit number, and that's great from a financial perspective. But like net new customers or customer acquisition rate, a customer retention rate, customer referral rate, These are, I know I'm throwing out lots of them. I just want people to realize there are lots of options for good measures. A lot depends on where you are in your company and what kind of measures make the most sense for you.
Yeah, and it needs to be something out there. Yeah, I love the easy one. That's to me, that's the most important things because that's I don't care whether you're in retail sales or you're selling houses or cars or business to business stuff. It's still about making it easy for the customer, the potential customer, to make a decision to buy because I'm not going to force you to buy. I can't. That ain't going to
Right.
work. I can't make a sale. All I
No.
can do is make it easy for you to decide to buy.
Yes. And every point, every touch point along the way can be hard or easy from how an invoice is paid, how a purchase order is made, how a product is delivered. So on our website, Morris, at visionedgemarketing.com, if people go in and put in customer effort, they will get a blog post on how to create a customer effort score.
Oh, cool. Boy, I bet that's cool. That's really neat.
Mhm.
Laura, this is wonderful. This is great stuff, and I think that all of us would want to be customer centric. And I'm afraid though that when we investigate and we begin to look at our companies, we're probably not as customer centric as we wish we were.
Well, again, I think there's a little worksheet also on the website under free resources, and it's a worksheet on how, that helps you determine how customer centric you are. So you can, it's a little self test, self audit. You can download it and kind of answer the questions. And the questions are written from the perspective of what would your customers say?
Hmm, makes
Right?
sense.
So rather than what you think, what would they say? A lot of companies that we work with, don't know what their customers would say. So maybe it's time to do some research, or maybe if you're large enough, set up a customer advisory board so you can get some good feedback. Asking questions, doing win-loss analysis. Why do you win? Why do you lose? Can give you a lot of insight um, into your processes, into your how hard or easy it is for you to do business with it, all of those kinds of things.
Boy, that would be great. That's super. I'm going to go there as soon as we finish here
Okay.
because that's something I need to do. No doubt about it. Laura, anything else that you practical that you'd like to share with us this afternoon?
No, you've asked some good questions. I know I did a lot of talking. I would love to do some listening. If anyone has something they would love to share with me, I'm happy to chat with them. And, we want to see people be successful, create long-term sustainable customer-centric companies. Because if you are that, you will be around for a long time. I was just on a conversation with a company that, is thinking about how do we make sure we're here in 100 years? That's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very good question.
Yeah.
That tells you a lot about a company that's been around for a while for that kind of time. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about it.
So it's a good question for everyone to be thinking about.
It
Will we
really
be here in
is.
100 years? How can we be sure we're here in 100
Yeah.
years?
No doubt about it. Well, Laura, I'll tell you this. I'm in Texas as well, and we're getting a brand new HEB right here in Forney that's going to be opening up here. Looking at it, it ought to be open today, but I'm sure it's going to be another couple of weeks. But I can't wait to get to my HEB.
I love my HEB Morris.
I tell you what, it's an amazing company. And
Yes.
talking about customer centric, they have another brand, Central Market,
Yes.
here in Dallas. I don't know if it's in Austin or not, but
Two.
two, yeah, there you go.
Two.
And boy, you talk about customer focused. These people are customer focused, and
Yes.
their products are just outstanding. So that's the end of the commercial for HEB and Central Market.
Okay, one
Laura,
last thing.
yeah,
One last
please,
thing about Central
please,
Market.
please.
At Thanksgiving, when all of the recipes come out in all of the magazines, they have already looked at them, and everything for every recipe that's in all those magazines is available in Central Market. You can walk in and say, and it's all there. Now that is customer centric. They know people are going to look in those magazines. They know they're going to look at those recipes, and they have the ingredients to make them. I think that's remarkable.
It is, it is, and it is just so great and right on target for being able to run a business and grow a business. It just makes perfect sense, Laura.
Yeah, about anticipating your customers' needs.
Yeah,
Who all of us can learn from that. All of us should learn how to do a better job of anticipating our customers' needs.
no doubt, no doubt. Laura, thank you again for being on the commission code with us this afternoon. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.